At first, nothing about it seemed off. She'd come over on weekends, stay the night, hang out with him in the living room, then leave the next day. Totally normal. I met her a couple weeks in. She was friendly, loud, one of those people who acts comfortable in a room 5 minutes after walking into it. Then little things started showing up. A toothbrush in Tyler's bathroom. A second shampoo bottle in the shower. Shoes by the front door that stayed there for days. A phone charger plugged in next to the couch. None of that sounds like much by itself. But together it gave off the same feeling. She wasn't visiting anymore, she was settling in. So one night I asked Tyler, casually, "Is Ashley here a lot now?" He laughed and said, "What, are you tracking her?" That immediately pissed me off. I said, "No, I'm asking because her stuff is everywhere." He waved it off. "Dude, she stays over sometimes, it's not a big deal." That became his favorite line, "It's not a big deal." Her showering there? Not a big deal. Her leaving stuff there all week? Not a big deal. Her doing laundry there? Also not a big deal. Then one Wednesday I came home from work, opened the door, and Ashley was sitting alone on our couch in one of Tyler's hoodies, watching TV and eating cereal out of one of my bowls. Tyler wasn't home. I asked, "So he left you here?" She shrugged. "He ran to the store." I went to my room because I didn't want to start something with her, but that night I brought it up with Tyler. I told him I'm not comfortable with your girlfriend being here when you're not. He got defensive fast. Why? Because she doesn't live here. She's not some random person. That's not the point. He gave me this look like I was being controlling, instead of making a completely normal point. "Dude, you know her." "No," I said. "I know your girlfriend's name. That's not the same thing." That conversation changed the whole vibe in the apartment. After that, Ashley stopped acting like a guest completely. She'd answer the door for deliveries. She moved my mail off the counter once because she was cleaning up. She used the washer and dryer. One night I found my leftovers gone and Tyler told me Ashley ate them because she didn't know. Didn't know what? That food in someone else's fridge might belong to someone? I started changing my own routine because of her. If I heard them in the kitchen, I'd wait in my room. I stopped watching TV in the living room because, somehow, they were always out there. Even small stuff started getting under my skin. Her blanket on the couch, makeup wipes in the bathroom trash, hair ties on the coffee table. It sounds petty when you say it out loud, I know that. But that's how this kind of thing happens. Not in one giant blow-up. In 100 little moments that make you feel less comfortable in your own place. Then one Friday night I got home late, opened the fridge and saw a sticky note taped to the shelf where I kept my groceries. "Please don't put raw chicken above the produce smiley face, Ashley." I just stood there staring at it. Not because of the note itself. Because of what it meant. Ashley wasn't acting like Tyler's guest anymore. She was acting like my third roommate. And the worst part was, Tyler clearly thought that was completely fine. I didn't say anything about the note that night, not because I was over it. Because I knew if I opened my mouth right then, I was going to say exactly what I was thinking, which was, "Who the hell do you think you are?" So I took the note off the fridge, set it on the counter, and went to my room. I could hear them in the living room, laughing at something on TV, while I sat there staring at that stupid little smiley face she'd drawn at the end of it. That was the part that got me, not even the note itself, the smiley face, like she was trying to be cute while correcting me in my own apartment. The next morning, Tyler was in the kitchen making eggs when I walked out. Ashley wasn't there, which honestly made it easier. I held up the note and asked, "What is this?" He barely looked at it. "Ashley put it there." "No shit." He gave me that already annoyed look he'd started using every time I brought her up. "So what's the problem?" I actually laughed. "The problem is your girlfriend leaving me instructions in my own kitchen like she pays rent. She was just saying raw chicken shouldn't be over produce." "That's not the point." "You keep saying that," he snapped, "but you're making a huge deal out of everything she does." There it was again. Same line, same tone. Like I was the unstable one. Like I'd invented the fact that there was suddenly a third adult in the apartment, using utilities, eating food, and leaving notes on the fridge. I said, "She's here constantly, Tyler. She showers here, she does laundry here, she's here when you're not even home. At what point are we allowed to call that living here?" He put the spatula down and turned to face me. "She doesn't live here." "Then why is half her stuff in the apartment?" "It's not half her stuff." "Okay, then why does she have toiletries here, clothes here, chargers here? Why is she comfortable enough to eat my food and leave me kitchen notes?" He crossed his arms and said, "Because she's my girlfriend and she spends time here. That's normal." Not this much. He stared at me for a second, then hit me with the line I knew was coming. You're being weird about this. That pissed me off way more than it should have. Not because it was original, because it was lazy. He didn't have an answer, so he turned it into a personality flaw on my end. I told him, I'm not being weird. I'm asking why I'm paying half the bills for an apartment that suddenly has 3 people living in it. His face changed a little at that. Not guilty. Just defensive in a different direction. She's not here enough to matter on bills. I looked at him and said, you serious? Because by then I'd already noticed the electric bill creeping up. Water too. Not by some insane amount, but enough that I'd clocked it. I work from home 2 days a week, so I know exactly how the apartment feels when it's just me and Tyler. It had changed. More laundry. More dishes. More hot water disappearing. More everything. Tyler shrugged and said, it's like a few extra showers, man. Relax. I dropped it right there because I could tell the conversation wasn't going anywhere. Tyler had already decided Ashley was normal and I was the problem. Nothing I said was going to get through to him while he was in that mode. But after that, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. And once I did, I realized how bad it had gotten. Ashley wasn't staying over sometimes. She was there 5, sometimes 6 nights a week. On the night she didn't sleep there, she'd still usually stop by after work and stay until midnight. She had a drawer in Tyler's room. Then 2 drawers. There was a makeup bag in the bathroom and a second hairdryer under the sink. Her groceries started showing up in the fridge. Almond milk, fruit cups, some weird yogurt she ate every morning. Except nobody had ever asked if I was cool with giving up fridge space to someone who didn't live there. The thing that really got under my skin was how fast they both adapted to me being uncomfortable. Not by fixing it, but by acting like I'd eventually shut up if they ignored me long enough. And mostly, they were right. Because every time I thought about bringing it up again, I'd talk myself out of it. I didn't want to be the bitter single roommate who couldn't handle his friend being in a relationship. I didn't want to turn the apartment into some passive-aggressive war zone over a girl I didn't even care about personally. Then Ashley started making changes. Not big ones at first, little things. Decorative hand towels in the bathroom, a candle on the kitchen counter. A fake plant on the bookshelf in the living room that definitely wasn't mine or Tyler's. One day I came home and found the hand soap in the bathroom had been swapped out for some expensive eucalyptus thing that smelled like a spa. I asked Tyler about it and he just said Ashley thought it'd make the place look nicer. I remember staring at him and saying, why does Ashley think she gets to decide how the place looks? He looked genuinely confused. It's hand soap. Again, not the point. That became the whole problem. Every single thing, taken by itself, sounded small enough to make me look insane. A candle, a towel, a charger, a couple showers, a few groceries. But stacked together, it painted a pretty obvious picture. She was moving in inch by inch, and Tyler was letting it happen because it was easier than having a boundary. The breaking point came on a Thursday night when I got home from work, walked into the living room, and saw Ashley sitting on the floor surrounded by our mail, sorting through it like she was doing admin for the household. She held up one of the utility bills and said, hey, your internet payment is due Monday. I just stared at her. Then I looked at Tyler, who was sitting on the couch like this was completely normal. And that was the moment I knew this was about to stop being awkward and turn into a real fight. I wish I could say I handled it calmly. I didn't. I walked into the living room, saw Ashley on the floor with the mail spread out around her, and for a second I genuinely thought I was looking at something I'd misunderstood. Like maybe she was moving it off the table, or Tyler had asked her to hand him something. But no. She had the electric bill in one hand, the internet bill in the other, and she was flipping through envelopes like she was balancing the household budget. Then she looked up and said, hey, your internet payment is due Monday. Not the internet bill, your internet payment. Like she'd already decided what belonged to who. I looked at Tyler first because I wanted him to be the one to explain why his girlfriend was touching my mail. He barely even reacted. He was half sprawled on the couch with a beer in his hand like this was completely normal. I said, why is she going through our mail? Ashley laughed a little, like I was making a joke. I'm not going through it, I was just sorting the bills. I looked at her and said, why? She blinked at me. Because they were all mixed together. That didn't answer the question. Tyler sat up and sighed like I was exhausting him. Dude, she was trying to help. With what? With the bills. We don't need help with the bills. Ashley gave me this tight smile, the kind people do when they're trying to stay polite but they've already decided you're unreasonable. I was literally just organizing them. I said, you don't live here, you don't organize anything here. That killed the fake friendly tone instantly. Tyler stood up off the couch and said, "Can you chill the hell out?" "No," I said. "I'm done chilling out. I've been chilling out for 2 months while your girlfriend slowly moves into this apartment without paying rent." Ashley stood up too, arms folded, suddenly offended. "I have not moved in." I laughed right in her face. "Really? Then why are your groceries in the fridge, your shampoo in the bathroom, your clothes in his room, and your ass here every single day?" Tyler stepped between us a little and said, "Watch how you talk to her." That sentence almost made me lose it. Not because I'd said anything crazy. Because now somehow I was being treated like I was attacking her, when the real issue was the two of them acting like I was some obstacle in the apartment I actually paid for. I pointed at the bills on the floor and said, "No, you watch this. This is exactly the problem. She's comfortable enough to sort our mail and tell me when things are due. That's not visiting, Tyler. That's living here." Ashley scoffed. "Oh my God, you're acting like I'm some freeloader." I stared at her. "What exactly would you call someone living in an apartment they don't pay for?" Tyler snapped before she could. "She does not live here." "Then how many nights a week is she sleeping here?" Neither of them answered. I looked at Tyler and said, "Seriously, say a number." He rolled his eyes. "I don't know, 4, maybe 5 sometimes." I just stared at him. Then I said, "Thank you, that's living here." He immediately tried to walk it back. "No, it's not. She still has her own place." "I don't care if she has a castle on the moon. She's here more than she's not. She uses the water, the electricity, the kitchen, the laundry, the living room, and apparently the mail. So yeah, from where I'm standing, she lives here." Ashley looked at Tyler like she wanted him to shut this down for her. Instead, he doubled down in the dumbest possible way. "She contributes." I actually paused. "What?" He said, "She buys stuff for the apartment." I laughed because it was so absurd I thought he had to be joking. "Oh, right," I said. "The candle, the eucalyptus soap. Incredible! I didn't realize that covered rent and utilities." Ashley's face went hard at that. "You know what? I have bought groceries too." "Great," I said. "Then eat the groceries you bought and stop eating mine." That one landed. I saw it in her face. Tyler stepped forward and said, "Dude, what the hell is your problem?" I looked at him and said, "My problem is that you moved your girlfriend in without asking me, and now both of you are acting like I'm insane for noticing." He shook his head. "No, your problem is that you're being territorial and weird because you're not used to sharing space." I actually had to laugh at that. Because it was such manipulative bullshit. This wasn't me refusing to share space. I was already sharing space with the person on the lease. That was the agreement. Not with whatever extra person Tyler decided to drag in and install piece by piece. So I said no. My problem is that I agreed to live with you, not you and Ashley. If she's gonna be here like this, then she needs to either start paying or stop acting like she lives here. Ashley folded her arms tighter and said, "I'm not paying rent for a place I don't live in." And I said, "Then stop living in it." That's when Tyler lost his temper. He pointed at the hallway and said, "If you hate it so much, maybe you should move out." The second he said it, the whole room went quiet. Because that was the first time he'd stopped pretending this was just a misunderstanding and showed me where his head actually was. In his mind, Ashley staying wasn't up for debate. If somebody had to be uncomfortable, it was going to be me. I looked at him and said, "You serious?" He didn't answer right away, which honestly made it worse. Ashley was standing there with her arms crossed, not saying a word now, just watching him. Finally, he said, "I'm saying you're making this apartment miserable over nothing." I nodded once because I suddenly understood exactly what had happened. This wasn't a roommate issue anymore. It wasn't even really about Ashley. It was about the fact that Tyler had already chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. So I looked at both of them, said "got it," and walked back to my room before I said something that would have blown the whole place up on the spot. But sitting there that night, hearing them whisper in the living room after the fight, I realized something that pissed me off even more than Ashley moving in. Tyler hadn't just crossed a boundary. He'd turned me into the outsider in my own apartment. The next morning, I woke up still pissed off, but now it was the cold kind of pissed off. The useful kind. The kind where you stop hoping the other person is going to suddenly become reasonable and start thinking about what you can actually prove. Because the second Tyler told me maybe I should move out, something in my head clicked. Up until then, I'd still been treating this like a misunderstanding I could fix if I explained it the right way. After that, I realized I was arguing with someone who already knew exactly what he was doing. So I started documenting everything, not in some unhinged conspiracy way. Just enough that if this turned into a fight over money, lease violations, or who was using what, I wasn't relying on memory while Tyler rewrote the story. I took pictures of Ashley's stuff in the apartment: her shampoo, her makeup bag, the extra shoes by the door, the drawer in Tyler's room that was half full of her clothes when he left it open one day. I started saving screenshots of our utility bills month to month. I even made a note in my phone of how many nights she stayed over for the next 2 weeks. It was 11 out of 14. And before anyone says, "Why didn't you just move out?" Because moving out isn't free. We were 6 months into a 12-month lease. Rent in our area had gone up since we signed it. I didn't have family nearby, and I wasn't about to blow a couple grand on deposits and moving costs because my roommate decided his girlfriend could slowly annex the apartment. I wanted Tyler to fix it, or at the very least I wanted him to stop pretending I was crazy. For about 3 days after the fight, things got weirdly quiet. Tyler barely spoke to me. Ashley still came over, but now she acted almost insultingly polite, like she was performing what a considerate guest would look like. "Hey, excuse me. Do you need the kitchen?" It was fake as hell, and honestly worse than if she just kept acting normal. Then the bills came out of my account. Electric was up again. Water too, nothing catastrophic but enough to be obvious. I texted Tyler while I was at work and said we needed to talk about utilities that night. He replied with, "About what?" That alone annoyed me, because he knew exactly what it was about. When I got home, Ashley was there too, sitting at our kitchen island eating takeout like she'd been invited to the meeting. I looked at Tyler and said, "Can we talk alone?" Ashley immediately started gathering her food like she was going to leave, but Tyler stopped her. "No, she can stay. This is about her, right?" I should have walked away right there. That was the moment he made it clear this wasn't a roommate conversation anymore, it was 2 against 1. I sat down anyway and put my phone on the counter with the bills pulled up. I said utilities have gone up since Ashley started basically living here. I'm not covering half of a 3-person apartment. Ashley let out this little laugh through her nose and looked at Tyler like I was embarrassing myself. Tyler crossed his arms and said, "How much are we even talking about?" I showed him the numbers. Electric's up, water's up, gas too. It's not random. There's an extra person showering here, doing laundry here, cooking here, charging everything here. Ashley jumped in first. "I don't even shower here every day." I looked at her and said, "That's not helping your case." Tyler rubbed his forehead and said, "Okay, so what do you want?" That question sounds reasonable, but his tone wasn't. It was the tone of someone humoring a toddler before telling him no. So I kept it simple. "I want one of 2 things," I said. "Either Ashley stops staying here almost every night, or she starts contributing to utilities. That's it." Ashley leaned back in her chair and said, "I'm not paying bills for a place I don't live." I looked at Tyler. "Then tell her to stop living here." Tyler's jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide that." I said, "Actually, I kind of do. I'm on the lease, so are you, she's not." That's when Ashley's whole attitude changed. Up until then, she'd been smug. After that, she got sharp. "So what, I'm not allowed to be with my boyfriend because his roommate has control issues?" I laughed because it was such a cheap move. "You can be with your boyfriend all you want. Go to your place." She threw her hands up. "I have roommates too." "Great," I said. "Then be their problem half the week." Tyler slammed his hand on the counter hard enough to make all 3 of us jump. "Can you stop talking to her like that?" I turned to him and said, "Can you stop acting like she's entitled to live here for free?" He stood up so fast his chair scraped back across the floor. "She does not live here?" At that point I was done arguing in circles, so I unlocked my phone, pulled up the note in my app, and read it out loud. "Last 14 nights, Ashley stayed here 11, used laundry twice, showered here at least 6 times, had packages delivered here twice, kept food here all week, sorted our mail, left notes in the kitchen." Ashley's face went bright red. "Are you seriously tracking me?" "No," I said. "I'm documenting a problem." Tyler looked at me like I'd just admitted to hiding cameras in the vents. "That's insane." "No, what's insane is pretending this isn't happening." Then, Ashley said the thing that blew the whole conversation apart. She looked around the kitchen, then at me, and said, "Honestly, I think you just hate that this apartment finally feels like a home." I stared at her. For a second, I actually thought I'd misheard her. Then I said, "A home for who?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Because Tyler did. He said, "Maybe if you weren't so hostile all the time it would feel more like a home." That was the moment I stopped trying to save the friendship. Not the note. Not the mail. Not even him telling me to move out. It was hearing my own roommate talk about our apartment like I was the outsider ruining their home. So I stood up, looked Tyler dead in the face and said, "All right, then we're done doing this nicely." And for the first time since Ashley started showing up, Tyler looked like he realized I might actually mean it. I didn't have some big master plan when I said that. I just knew I was done sitting there while Tyler and Ashley slowly took over the apartment and then acted like I was unstable for noticing. So the next morning, I called the leasing office. I kept it simple. I said I had a roommate issue, there was someone effectively living in the unit who wasn't on the lease, and I wanted to know what my options were before things got worse. I wasn't trying to get anyone evicted on the spot. I just wanted to know where I stood. The woman in the office asked one question that made me feel immediately less crazy. Is she receiving mail there? I said yes. She paused and said, okay, that's a problem. Apparently our lease had a pretty clear clause about long-term guests. Nobody could stay more than a certain number of nights in a row, or within a month, without being approved and added. If management decided someone was basically living there off-book, they could fine the leaseholders or force the issue. So no, I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being dramatic. Tyler had actually put both of us in a bad spot because he didn't want to tell his girlfriend no. I asked what they needed from me, and the woman said if I wanted to formally report it, I'd need documentation. Dates, details, anything showing she was regularly staying there. Good thing I had already started keeping track. I didn't report it that day, not yet. I texted Tyler instead and told him we needed to talk one more time, just the two of us, before I involved management. I was still giving him an out, which in hindsight was more generous than he deserved. He agreed, and Ashley wasn't there when I got home that night, which already told me he knew this wasn't as harmless as he'd been pretending. We sat at the kitchen table and I laid it out as clearly as I could. I told him I'd spoken to the leasing office. I told him the guest policy. I told him I had documentation showing Ashley had been staying there constantly. Then I gave him the easiest possible solution. Either Ashley stops staying over more than a couple nights a week, or she gets added to the lease and starts paying her share of utilities. End of story. Tyler just stared at me for a second like he couldn't believe I'd gone around him. Then he said, "You actually called the office?" "Yeah." "That's insane." "No," I said, "what's insane is forcing me to do this because you refuse to admit what's happening." He leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "You're seriously threatening our lease over this?" I looked at him and said, "You threatened the lease when you moved someone in without asking." He got quiet after that, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that meant he was thinking. It was the kind that meant he was angry and trying not to explode. Finally, he said, "Ashley's going through a rough time at her place." I just looked at him. That was the first honest thing he'd said in weeks, and it explained way more than he probably meant it to. Because suddenly, all the little details made sense. Why she was there constantly, why she'd gotten so comfortable so fast, why Tyler had been acting like this wasn't temporary, but also refusing to call it what it was. I asked, "What does rough time mean?" He rubbed his face and said, "She's having issues with her roommates. One of them moved her boyfriend in, there's constant fighting, she hates being there. So yeah, she's been here more." I actually laughed at that because it was too perfect. I said, "So let me get this straight. Ashley's roommate moved in a partner without asking, and Ashley's solution was to do the exact same thing to me?" Tyler got defensive immediately. "It's not the same." "It's exactly the same." "No, it's not, because Ashley isn't on the lease there either." I stared at him. "Do you hear yourself?" That's when the conversation finally stopped being about logic, and turned into what it had really been all along. Tyler wanted what was easiest for Tyler. That was it. He didn't care if it was fair, and he definitely didn't care that it was my home too. He cared that Ashley was mad at her roommates, and letting her crash at our place full-time was easier than dealing with her being upset. I told him, "I don't care if she hates her place. That doesn't make this her apartment." He snapped, "You have zero empathy." "No," I said, "I have boundaries." He laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. "You know what your problem is? Everything has to be on your terms." That one actually made me sit back. Because coming from him, it was such a ridiculous accusation I almost didn't know what to do with it. I'd spent weeks giving him chances to fix this. I'd tolerated way more than I should have. I hadn't complained the first 10 times Ashley crossed a line because I was trying not to blow up the friendship. And now I was the controlling one because I didn't want to subsidize his girlfriend. So I told him exactly that. I said, "You know what's wild? I've bent over backwards to avoid making this ugly. Meanwhile, you let your girlfriend eat my food, use my stuff, sort my mail, and basically move in here, and somehow I'm the selfish one." He looked away. Didn't deny any of it, just looked away. That was when I knew I had my answer. I stood up and said, "You've got until the end of the week to figure it out. Either Ashley stops staying here, or I report it and start looking at options to get off this lease." Tyler stood up too. "So that's it? You're giving me an ultimatum?" I said, "No, I'm giving you consequences." Then I went to my room, shut the door, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt calm. Not because things were fixed. Because they weren't. But because I was finally done arguing with someone who had no intention of being fair. Tyler didn't speak to me for the next 2 days. Ashley still came over. And on Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen and found both of them sitting there with coffees, whispering like they'd been waiting for me. Tyler looked up and said, "We talked, and we've made a decision." The fact that he said "we" instead of "I" told me everything before he even opened his mouth again. The second Tyler said "we made a decision," I knew exactly how this was going to go. Not because I could read minds. Because by that point, every single conversation had followed the same pattern. I'd point out an obvious boundary. Tyler would act confused. Ashley would get offended. Then somehow the real issue would become my attitude instead of what they were actually doing. So I leaned against the counter and said, "All right, let's hear it." Tyler had that look people get when they're about to say something stupid but they've convinced themselves it sounds reasonable. Ashley was sitting beside him with both hands around a coffee mug, staring at me like I was the one making this apartment tense. Tyler cleared his throat and said, "Ashley's going to stay at her place more." I just looked at him. Then he added, "But we're not doing the whole, she can only come over 2 nights a week thing. That's ridiculous." There it was. Not a solution. Not accountability, just a softer version of, "We're going to keep doing what we want, and you can deal with it." I asked, "So what exactly changes?" Tyler looked annoyed immediately, like I was being difficult on purpose. "I just told you. She won't be here as much." "How much is not as much?" He shrugged. "I don't know, less." I laughed because it was so useless, it almost felt insulting. Ashley finally jumped in. "We're trying to compromise." "No," I said. "You're trying to keep the same setup with slightly better PR." Tyler pushed his chair back. "Why are you impossible about this?" That question actually made me angry again, because it was such a perfect summary of the last 2 months. They'd invaded my space, raised my bills, ignored every boundary, and now I was impossible because I wanted a straight answer. So I gave him one. I said, "Here's what's going to happen. Starting today, Ashley is not staying here more than 2 nights a week. She's not here when you're not here. She's not using the laundry, not touching my food, not sorting mail, not redecorating, none of it. If that doesn't work for you, I call the leasing office Monday and let them handle it." Tyler stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor. "You don't get to make rules for my girlfriend." I looked him dead in the face and said, "In the apartment I pay for? Yeah, I kinda do." Ashley slammed her mug down and said, "You are such an asshole." That didn't even bother me at that point. What bothered me was Tyler's face. Because instead of looking embarrassed, or even conflicted, he looked furious on her behalf. Like I'd attacked his wife, not the woman who'd spent weeks acting like my apartment was her starter home. He said, "If you report us, you're blowing up the lease for both of us." And that was the moment I realized he still thought I was bluffing. So I pulled out my phone, opened the email draft I'd already written to management with the dates, the guest log, the utility increases, everything, and set it on the counter in front of him. "I'm not threatening you," I said. "I'm informing you." For the first time in this entire mess, Tyler actually looked nervous. Not guilty, not sorry. Nervous. He grabbed my phone off the counter before I could stop him and started reading. I took it right back out of his hand and told him not to touch my stuff, which only made him more pissed. He started pacing the kitchen, running both hands through his hair, saying I was being extreme, petty, vindictive, all the usual words people use when consequences finally show up and they don't like what they look like. Ashley just sat there with her arms crossed, staring at me like I'd ruined her life. Finally, Tyler stopped pacing and said, "Fine. If this is how you want to do it, then let's do it. I'll talk to the office too." I said, "Great." He looked thrown off by how quickly I answered. I don't think he expected me to call his bluff. He was so used to me backing down, trying to keep the peace, trying to salvage the friendship, that the idea of me being fully done hadn't really hit him yet. By Monday morning, I'd emailed the leasing office. I attached everything. The dates Ashley had stayed over, pictures of her stuff in the apartment, screenshots of the bills, even a photo of the note she'd left me on the fridge, because by then it felt symbolic more than useful. The woman from the office called me that afternoon and said they'd be addressing it directly with Tyler since both of us were on the lease. Tyler didn't talk to me for 2 days after that. Then management emailed both of us with 2 options. Either Ashley applied to be added to the lease and we reworked the rent split, or she stopped staying there beyond guest limits immediately. If not, they'd consider it a lease violation and start the formal process. That was the first real wall Tyler had hit, because suddenly this wasn't me being weird. It was the lease, the money, and the possibility of screwing up his housing situation because he'd let his girlfriend move in through the side door. Ashley never applied. Of course she didn't. She didn't want to live there officially. She wanted all the benefits of living there without paying for any of it. So for about a week she disappeared. No shoes by the door, no makeup in the bathroom, no random blanket on the couch. The apartment felt quiet again, almost weirdly empty. And if that had been the end of it, maybe Tyler and I would have had a shot at recovering from it eventually. But Tyler couldn't leave it alone. He started being hostile in little ways, leaving dishes in the sink, taking up the washing machine all weekend, playing TV too loud in the living room when he knew I was working. It was all small enough to deny, but obvious enough that I knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to punish me without doing anything direct enough to call out. Then one night, maybe 2 weeks after management stepped in, he told me he was moving out when the lease ended, and that I'd shown my true colors. I remember just looking at him and thinking, you moved your girlfriend into our apartment, let her treat me like a guest in my own home, tried to gaslight me every step of the way, and I'm the one who showed my true colors. I didn't even argue, I just said good. And honestly, that was the end of the friendship right there. Not with some huge screaming match, not with some dramatic final betrayal, just with that one word. We barely spoke for the last month of the lease. Ashley still came around sometimes, but not enough to violate anything, and she never looked me in the eye again. Tyler moved out the day the lease ended. We haven't talked since. The part that still gets me isn't even Ashley, it's Tyler. I could have understood him being blinded by a relationship. I could have even understood him making a selfish choice once or twice. What I can't get past is how easily he let me become the villain for wanting the most basic respect in my own home. All because telling his girlfriend no was harder than screwing over a friend he'd had for nearly a decade. So yeah, my roommate moved his girlfriend in without asking. But the real reason that situation blew up wasn't the extra showers, or the utility bills, or the note on the fridge. It was finding out that the second Tyler had to choose between being fair and keeping Ashley happy, I was never really in the running.